Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Hawthorne. I'm class of 87 and a member of the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement. And I'm proud today to present Pitzer at Home Mindful Tuesday Lecture Series, Tips for Planning Ahead in Times of Uncertainty with Professor Marcus Rodriguez. And again, that we talked about in our description of the session, feelings of uncertainty and self-soothing when feeling overwhelmed. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Professor Rodriguez.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for joining today. I'm excited. I think this is like the different format that I had requested, and hopefully it can be, it can allow for more interaction. So if anyone feels comfortable, I would, again, love it if your cameras are on, and I also understand if you're not in a place where that's possible. So yeah, so what I want to talk about is to continue sharing some skills, again, skills that I use and I guess I learned in a clinical context. So I learned as a therapist in like treating patients with, who are struggling with mental health problems, but also skills that I use every day in my own life, skills that I teach my family, skills that I teach my students at Pitzer, and skills that I think can be valuable to all of us in the situations that we are facing, again, especially as we have a lot of uncertainty coming up for what this next semester is going to look like. So I wanted to do a few things, I guess, review what we've talked about already. So we started this series back in, I think, like April or March. And so we talked about wise mind, right? A paradigm for making decisions, for arriving at the closest thing we can to a sense of certainty, a sense of clarity. We talked about radical acceptance of how do we accept things that feel like they're really not the way we want them to be. And acceptance, again, doesn't mean that we're against change. It doesn't mean that we are passive, but that we can make space for, actually make space for change so we don't get stuck and get bitter. And then we talked about strategies and skills for tolerating distress and skills for taking care of ourselves and taking care of, like, when we need to be able to unplug, to be able to step back and engage in self-care so that our efforts at making an impact on society, on the world, and also in whatever other goals we have, that we can maintain those and sustain those. So today I wanted to add, again, some more what I hope are really practical tools. And I think this is kind of like a kitchen sink approach. It's like, let me throw lots of different skills at you and hopefully some of them stick and hopefully some of them feel useful. And if even there's just like one thing about each lecture that feels like, yeah, I'm willing to try that, then it feels like a success. So that's what I'm going for. So today, what I wanted to do was actually to start and lead off with the loving kindness meditation that I had mentioned wanting to do last time, which was, I guess it was almost like a month ago now, but I'd said I wanted to do a self-compassion exercise. And I wanted to say something about, like, what does it even mean to be compassionate? I think that word is thrown around a lot. But the most common definition, at least used in clinical psychology, is that compassion is sensitivity to suffering and distress in ourselves and in others, with a commitment to try to alleviate and prevent it, right? And so if we look at that definition, there's really two parts to that. The first part of compassion involves recognizing the difficulties and the pain and the suffering that are a part of human life, right? It involves acknowledging that there are difficult and traumatic experiences and that those cause a broad range of really painful emotions in all human beings, right? And whether it be fear or sadness or grief or shame. And it also means, right, being able to turn towards these emotions in a way that's warm and kind and caring, which is really, really difficult to do. And then the second part of this definition of mindfulness is the desire, the motivation, the commitment to relieve that suffering. Again, I feel like if you are an alum of Pitzer, if you're affiliated with Pitzer, I think this is probably a concept that drew you to Pitzer, is that we are, again, relative to places where I've worked, it's a place where there is a general shared commitment beyond what I think is normative in most institutions, of both caring and recognizing pain and difficulty, while also like having the courage and the strength and the confidence to take action to achieve, to help achieve greater well-being for those around us, for our communities, for ourselves. And so those are the two pieces. And I think that's really relevant to what we're dealing with right now in our society with all of the issues. So I want to lead us in, again, there's lots of ways to develop compassion, right? The power of compassion, I think, is kind of self-evident, that it can help us to heal wounds. It can help us to regain a positive outlook, right? And a lot of times, especially if we have been really hurt, if we have been traumatized, like in drawing on self-compassion, it can help us to succeed in accepting our past for what it is, right? And help us to accept our weaknesses, help us to work on our strengths in order to like improve ourselves in the ways that we want to, and also to be benevolent towards others, right? And to recognize and accept differences, to cooperate, and to dare to trust. So I'm hoping that the exercise that I lead you in can do any or some of these things. And so this exercise that I want us to start out with is called loving kindness. So loving kindness meditations are not at all unique to psychotherapy. They're not unique to, certainly not unique to the type of treatment that I specialize in, which is called dialectical behavior therapy. But this is one that was developed by my colleague, Dr. Faria Kamal. So she is a clinical psychologist, and she put together a loving kindness for racism and violence. And she put this together in the context of what's been going on recently. And I found it to be really helpful, and I wanted to lead us in that. So as what we've been doing in the past, I will ring the bell to begin, and I'll ring it twice. The first ring is just to bring our attention to the present moment, maybe to take a moment to just like notice that you're here in this room, that you're breathing, right? That we've been breathing all day, but just to like acknowledge, like, here I am, here's my body, I'm in this space. And to greet yourself like in a gentle, kind way, like, hello, Marcus, or hello, Brooke, hello, Ellen. To say that in a way that feels gentle, that feels kind. And then I'll ring the second bell for us to start. And essentially what loving kindness meditations are is it will guide us through thinking about different people and trying to send and imagine love and kindness that we send and generate towards ourselves and towards others. So if you notice your mind wander, thank yourself for noticing that, and then bring it back. If you notice your mind wander and you're like, no, I don't want to keep doing this, then also be gentle with yourself, acknowledge that, and use your wise mind to decide, I'd like to distract, and I'll step back in when the time feels right. So I will ring the bell twice to begin and once at the end. So you can put your hands on your lap, your feet on the floor. You can close your eyes if you want. Just notice that you're here in this space and just greet yourself with a gentle hello. So start by thinking of yourself, how you may feel upset or hurt right now. Maybe you faced oppression or exclusion, racism or violence. Maybe you've witnessed others experience it. I'm going to read some phrases, and I'd encourage you in your own way, in a way that feels true and right for you, to repeat this in your own mind. Or you can change the words in a way that they feel better, they feel more true for you. But think about how your conviction of how you feel of what's happening in our country and our society that is wrong or hurtful to you or to others. Practice sending loving kindness first to yourself. You can say something like the following: may I be safe. May I be loved. May I be valued. May I live in peace. You can imagine yourself, if you want, almost imagine yourself in a mirror standing in front of you and just sending loving kindness. May I be safe. May I be loved. May I be valued. May I live in peace. Now bring to mind someone that you love who has experienced oppression, right? It can be someone that you care about or someone that you love that maybe has had to deal with this hate, this challenge, with the pain of what's going on. In the same way, you can picture this person and send them loving kindness. Maybe repeating these phrases in your own mind, changing the words in whatever way feels most true for you. May you be safe. May you be protected by others. May others come to your aid so you don't have to bear this alone. May we support you so there's no question that you belong. May you be loved. May you be respected. May you be valued. May you live in peace. May your voice be heard. May you be treated with dignity. Maybe just practice imagining yourself sending this kindness and love to this person. Now let this loved one go and bring to mind a stranger or strangers who have experienced racism, oppression, or violence. You can still send every bit of good wishes from your heart to them. May you be safe. May you be protected by others at every turn. May your voice be heard. May you be treated as equal with dignity and respect. And let the strangers go and bring to mind someone or people who you are angry with, who you don't like or you disagree with, perhaps who have also experienced racism, oppression, or violence. To my enemies, may you be safe. May you be loved. May you be respected. May you be valued. Finally, let's bring it all together. You, the people you love, the people you don't know, the people you despise, all beings. May all beings be safe without exception. May all beings be protected by others. May we protect each other. May all beings have freedom to live in peace. May all beings be treated with dignity and respect. May all beings work to create change in our spaces that reflect inclusion and love. Now we can sit together for just a few moments in silence, in solidarity with those who have experienced oppression and violence and racism. Just take a few mindful breaths. Notice your body in this moment, in this space. As you've generated loving kindness towards yourself, towards your loved one, a stranger, an enemy, and all beings. Okay. What did you notice? What was that like? Anyone who's willing to share what you noticed in that practice?
I have something to share. That's all right.
Yeah. Hi, Kathy.
I noticed that for me, the practice of sending loving kindness to whatever people I dislike or my quote unquote enemies was it was an interesting framing of it. It's not something that I typically do. I felt like that it's easier to send it to people that you care for than those that you might not. But it felt like a important thing to think about, that everyone is deserving of these things.
Did you notice like changes in your body when you were like imagining yourself sending like that love and kindness to them?
I think I started off more tense when I was starting to do that, and then as I was reflecting on it more, I think it got easier.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that's a common experience for sure. Anyone else? What did you notice? What was that like? Okay. Well, I mean, I hope that feels helpful. Again, there's a lot of ways to generate compassion, a lot of ways to practice building that gentleness towards ourselves. This is one way that we can be gentle with ourselves and say it's okay, and to be kind towards the experiences that we're having, while still obviously maintaining our commitment to doing what we can to make things better, and to relieving suffering. So I want to share a skill or a set of skills today that actually serve that purpose of more directly and specifically helping to relieve distress. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of elements of what we're, facing. I think like a lot of our students are really uncertain about what's going to be happening. Is it going to be the way they want it to be this next semester? What's going to happen? How are these protests going to end? Are we going to see the changes that feel that can actually prevent these types of problems in the future or reduce their frequency? So we have a lot of concerns about like what's going on. So I'm hoping to be able to teach some skills, building on the skills that I've taught already, that can help with that, right? They can help reduce the intensity of some of that tension that shows up when we start thinking about those things, when we feel, even like sometimes like when we feel really distressed, we can feel almost disconnected from reality, right? If we get at really high levels of distress. Or also, I think to help us, hopefully these are skills that can help us cope with crisis situations so that we can engage in meaningful change based activities, so that we can stay here and now, right? Working on either our own pain or helping with the pain of others. So yeah, this one of the skills that I want to teach today, I think it's building on what I had talked about briefly last week, is the idea of how to soothe ourselves, right? Like choosing something that for your vision can help, right? So something that can help with your hearing, through scent, through taste, through touch. So one of the ways when we find ourselves in high level of distress, we can just observe, right? In our mind, like, what is it that I can do? Like, what is it that I can see? Maybe like watching fish swim in an aquarium, right? Watching logs burn in a fireplace, maybe like laying down and watching the clouds move through the sky, or like watching clouds roll over a hill, looking at, the stars, looking at a beautiful photo. So one thing that we can do to help us calm down, is tuning into our senses. And those are some examples of how we can do that with vision. We can also do that through hearing, right? We can like actively and very attentively listen to the sounds of birds, the sounds of, our favorite music, the sounds of like waves, the sounds of falling raindrops, like noticing, even noticing the silence in a particular moment, right? So that's another thing, is like to step into a moment and let the sounds, the sights soothe us. Or we can do that with scents, right? Whether it be like the smell of perfume, the smell of like freshly cut grass, the smell of like your favorite soap or shampoo, the smell of like fresh fruit that you've cut. And then we can do that with taste, right? Like eating something with attention, with mindfulness. So that could be like a tea, a soup, right? A homemade popcorn, like doing something, like making something that soothes your scent, that when you smell it, you're like, ooh, I love that smell, right? Like I love the smell of popcorn. So like noticing that, and then like fully and mindfully soothing in a really difficult situation. Again, these are skills that won't necessarily fix the moment, but they can help us to survive a moment so that we can prevent it from getting worse, so that we can remain engaged in our valued living and things that are important to us. And then another way we can do that is with touch, right? So you can touch or feel something with your hands, right? Or your bare feet, like silk, or petting an animal, or, walking barefoot in the grass, and really mindfully, like maybe like taking a hot bath, right? Like touching your face with a feather, or like using one of those like head massage things. It's like a metal claw, and you like go up and down your head, like really fully focusing and noticing those physical sensations. Again, to soothe, not necessarily solve, but help to soothe you in that moment. So those are like, again, some reminders of ways that we can tap into our five senses. And now I want to share a worksheet. So this is, again, from the same worksheet that I was sharing earlier, the same book, but this is like a different skill. So this skill is called Improve the Moment. So these are skills for what we can do when we're in a difficult situation, right? And I imagine like some of our students might be coming back in the fall and not be able to hang out with their friends in the cafeteria because of the restrictions that we have due to wanting to reduce risk and exposure to ourselves and to the people in our community who may be more vulnerable to coronavirus. So thinking about, the ways that our life will be different, and in some ways like not what some of our students want it to be. Or again, this can apply to anything, especially like the long-term effort that we'll make to try to bring about change on issues like justice, like police reform, like prison reform. These are things that take a long time. And in that process, we need to come up with ways that how can we soothe, how can we take some of these challenging moments and make them a little bit better, right? Where like just distracting isn't quite enough. If I just like put my face in cold water, like what I talked about last week, that helps maybe in a moment of distress so that I can have some physical relief. But how can I, when I'm going through like long-term efforts at making change or at living my life and it's not quite working out the way that I want it to, what can I do to help make that moment a little bit better? So there is a acronym and it's called IMPROVE, and it means just that. It's like, how do we improve a moment? And here's some of the strategies. We can use our imagery, right? Imagination, right? So we can create positive events and sensations with our imagination, right? So we could take like a fantasy trip. We could imagine being in a safe place, right? We could like look through like a travel guide or look through souvenir photos, or like imagine ourselves in a calm and a quiet place where we feel safe, where we feel peace. One of the places that I go to in my mind is I like close my eyes and I picture myself. I still remember the first time that I snorkeled, right? And I'm like looking down and there's lots of fish and it feels kind of magical because when you're like fully like laying on your stomach, you don't really have to use a lot of effort and you're just sort of buoyant there on the salt water. And I just remember that feeling of like floating, where your ears are under the water, so everything sounds kind of muffled. And so like sometimes with imagery, I'll close my eyes and I'll be in the middle of like a stressful moment. Let's say, I don't know, maybe I'm standing in a long line. Like I went to Costco a few days ago and the line was really long. So if you're standing there and you're like, oh shoot, like I've got an appointment and it starts like in 5 minutes, and I'm probably gonna have to have the appointment in my car, and that's gonna feel really embarrassing because I'm gonna set up the phone and it's gonna be like the back seat. And so noticing that, and while I'm standing there, I can close my eyes and I can picture that scene, right? Or I can picture the scene of like, like I remember once I went to this camp and they had this lake and there was this like little dock that went out, and I could picture myself sitting there on the dock and just hanging my feet off the edge and imagining that space and that calm. So like trying to generate, again, images that for you lead to like a sense of peace, a sense of safety, a sense of calm, and generating as much detail as you can in the process of imagining that, generating as much detail as you can, so that you can, I don't know, benefit from that experience. So if we have time, I can lead us in one of those imaginal exercises. So another one is finding meaning, right? So this is when you are in a difficult situation, how can I find meaning in this situation? How can I do something that is going to take a really difficult situation and make it, I guess, have some sense of purpose for me? Again, it doesn't make it not painful. It doesn't make it feel good, but how can we, find deeper meaning in an unpleasant situation, even a terrifying situation, right, that you can master to make you feel stronger, right? Maybe like fear can help you prepare for difficult tasks. So you feel really scared, and I guess one way to make meaning is like, this is going to help me be more prepared, right? Or focusing on the positive aspect of some painful situation. This works, I think, for some people some of the times. I think sometimes when I'm going through a really difficult situation, I think like, oh, this is going to be a good opportunity for me to tell a story to my patients about how, or to my students about how I struggled with like a really difficult situation and what skills I used or failed to use and wish I had used. And so I think like, okay, or like if I feel like a lot of anxiety in a given moment, and again, like I tend to be someone who I think I'm more depressive and less anxious. Like anxiety isn't quite like my struggle necessarily. I mean, everyone has it, but it's not like a huge problem for me. And so when there's moments that I feel really scared, and I notice feeling like that terror that some of my patients feel when they feel panic, a part of me is making some meaning. I'm like, wow, I think this is really going to help me like understand, and then I think of a patient. I'm like, yeah, I think this will help me understand them and that experience. Again, I still feel scared. It still feels terrible, but maybe it makes that moment feel a little bit more bearable. So that's the idea of meaning. And there's a lot of research about how meaning can help us get through a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty. I know one of the books that I read in high school that really impacted me was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And again, it's the same idea of like, how can we find meaning even in really painful and difficult situations? Another one is relaxation, right? So like doing things. Here's a list of different actions, right? Like taking a prayer. I skipped prayer. So prayer is the idea of, if you are religious, if you're spiritual, right? Opening your heart to a higher force, to a greater wisdom, to God, asking for power, asking for strength, right? Trusting that this higher force or that God will take care of you. And I think that this is mainly helpful for believers, but even if you're not like a person, who considers himself religious or spiritual, I think you could still try. I know for me, as someone who I'm both religious and spiritual, I find it to be really helpful. In again, a difficult situation, it's not just going to be made better by distracting. Like, how do I get through these next 2 days, right, of stress or of difficulty? Like prayer can be one of those things that we turn to, that for that moment, it can help make a difficult situation a little bit more bearable. Another one is relaxing actions, right? Is like adopting a relaxed and an upright posture. I think sometimes when we're stressed, we don't even realize that we just like walk around kind of like, I don't know, we just like carry tension. And until you stop and you notice, like, am I carrying any tension in the muscles along my spinal cord, for example? Am I carrying any tension in my face, in my hands right now, in my chest? And so like maybe start by even just like taking a relaxed and upright posture. Can sometimes it can make a difficult situation, right? If you have to, I don't know, if you have to stand in line for a long time, that's painful, that's uncomfortable. If you have to stand in line like this for 2 hours, that's going to be even more difficult. And so what can I do to make this situation a little bit more bearable, right? If I have to, I don't know, if I have to take like a really big pill, for if I got sick, like what can I wash it down with? Can I at least choose something that I'm going to find really pleasant? Another is one thing in the moment, right? That is putting all of your attention, focusing all of your attention on this single moment, right, that you perceive, and you perceive with all your senses. I think that there's a lot of power in this particular skill. I'm thinking about one of the moments that really stands out to me of when I use this. I remember, so I was feeling really depressed, about 4 years ago now, almost 5 years ago. And my wife kept saying, like, Marcus, I really think you should go to therapy. I think you should go find a therapist. And I was like, oh, I don't want to. Like, I'm worried that it's not going to help, or I'm worried that I'm going to be like super judgmental of my therapist. And so I was like, and I resisted, but finally she's like, no, you need to go. And I was like, fine. So I went, I called someone up. I was like, all right, I'm going to find a DBT therapist, because like, that's what I do. I do DBT. So like, I can kind of learn some DBT and also get help with my depression. So I go and I go through this therapy, like this first like hour, this first session. And I'm like, just like, honestly, I was like weeping. I had this like pile of Kleenex on the table in front of me on the couch, and I was just like talking about things that I generally like I wouldn't let myself fully dive into, but I did. And I was like feeling just really raw. And near the end of the session, this therapist was just asking me different questions. And near the end of the session, she said, Marcus, I wonder if what you need is therapy, or if you need like a group or like a team to do therapy with. Like, are you looking for, like, maybe you're looking for a place to work and do therapy? Because I had taken like that time off of school. I wasn't doing any therapy because I think I was too depressed to do therapy for others. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I'm wondering if maybe you would want to work here with us. And I was like, what is happening? Like, for a moment, I just froze. I was like, did she just offer me a job? Like, I'm here. Like, I was totally in shock. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I know how to interview for a job, and it's not by like weeping my like until just like I'm just like a sloppy mess and covering her table in Kleenexes. Like, what's going on? But I think maybe in her mind, she's like, hey, here's this guy. He's young. He's like, has a good like education. He seems to be really good at DBT. He works with adolescents. Like, maybe he could work for me and that could help him with his depression. And I remember just like staring down at the floor, and I was like, what is going on? Obviously in that moment, I felt like this feels really unsafe. This feels like not the place I want to be vulnerable with my emotions, obviously. So I like took that time. I used some of the distress tolerance skills that I taught in my last session. I regulated my emotions. And the therapist was like, Marcus? And I was like, yeah, hold on, I'm thinking. And I don't know how, I think it might have taken me like 3 or 4 minutes just in silence. And she's like, are you okay? I was like, yes, I'm thinking about how to respond. Hold on. And I just kept looking down at the ground while I like obviously realized like I need to control my emotions. I need to get in. And so I was like, I mean, I basically ended by saying, no, I actually was here for therapy, not like applying for a job, as I like clean up a huge pile of Kleenexes and try to throw them in the trash. And I was like, yeah. So that session ended. I was like, yeah, no, this is not, what I was looking for. Thank you. So I left, and as I'm leaving, I felt like even more upset in that moment. I felt really, I felt like, look, I'm already down, and then I finally decide to reach out for help, and then that happens. Like, what are the chances that you go to therapy and they offer you a job? And so I wanted to call my wife. The first thing I wanted to do is call her and be like, I can't believe what you did to me. Like, you need to know. And I just wanted to blame her for my pain in that moment, right? And I called, and she didn't pick up. And so I called again, and she didn't pick up. And I was like, oh. And I'm really glad she didn't, because I think if she had picked up, I probably would have said some really nasty things, right? Because I didn't want to feel the sadness in that moment. I'd rather feel angry. And then I remember this skill, and I remember thinking like, this is already like it felt like a really low moment in my life where like I finally was like, yes, I'm depressed enough, I need to go to therapy. And then therapy turned out to be like that for me. And I was walking, and I remembered this skill, and I was like, one thing in the moment. And I had parked pretty far away from the clinic. And so I was like, well, I'm going to walk, and I'm just going to walk. And it was really, really hard because my mind kept going to like, I can't believe she said that. Like, one day I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to like tell people like what a terrible therapist and how unethical. And I was like, should I tell the board? And right. And my mind kept going to like, I can't believe my wife made me like go to therapy. And I told her, and I just kept bringing my mind back to just walk. Just notice the feeling of the wind on your face, of the sun on your back. Notice the feeling of your feet touching the ground. And I kept, and again, my mind kept going to like how sad, how pathetic, like how upsetting that was. And then keep bringing my mind back to just walking, just this moment. And it's an extremely powerful skill that we can use, again, in a really painful moment. It doesn't fix it. It doesn't make that moment all of a sudden like perfect and better and rosy. But what it can do is it can help improve it a little bit, help get us to the car, so that by the time I got in the car and my wife called me, I was in a slightly better place, so that I didn't just get mad at her. And I was instead able to like pick up the phone and just start crying, instead of picking up the phone and yelling at her, right, and getting mad. And then she'd get defensive and she'd be like, what? Like, I meant nothing but good things for you. Like, I didn't send you to therapy to punish you. And then we would have ended up arguing, and I wouldn't have gotten what I wanted. But it was using that like just one thing in the moment skill that get me to my car that can help with that. And so sometimes if you're in a moment and you're feeling overwhelmed by emotion, or it's really not, the moment is not what you want it to be, to say, I'm just going to do this one thing right now. I'm just going to eat this one bowl of soup, or I'm just going to like drive right now. I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to have this conversation. I don't know who you're talking to. Like, I'm just going to, maybe you're like talking to like someone about like your credit card or something, like a bank. Like, I'm just going to engage in this one thing right now. There's actually a lot of power in that. I'm just going to wash these dishes. And each time my mind wanders, I'm going to bring it back to just washing the dishes. So that's one thing in the moment. The next is vacation, right? So vacation is basically taking a time out. It is interrupting a really busy day by doing something that's completely different, right? For a defined period of time. I think what makes it a vacation is that you buy a round trip ticket, right? You don't just like buy a one-way ticket to like not deal with this moment. It's saying like, I'm going to have, for a defined period of time, I'm going to, I don't know, I love sitting in coffee shops. Like that's just like such a great place for me. I like the smell, I like the sounds. I even like when it's like kind of crowded and like people are like, I don't know, like jostling for space, right? Like I just like everything about being in coffee shops. So like for me, it's like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna buy a coffee, I'm gonna drink it, I'm gonna like look at my phone, I'm gonna call a friend while I'm in this coffee shop, right? And then when I'm done with my cup of coffee, I'm gonna come back and do the thing I'm doing, right? So if you're studying and you start feeling like really unfocused, it's pointless at some point to keep pushing yourself to try to concentrate more. Instead, set an alarm for maybe 10 minutes and then use that time to make yourself, I don't know, like a cup of tea, to go and like lay down in your blankets and just listen to some music, to step back and do some of the things here on this list. So that's vacation, which again is different from avoidance. Like we don't want to just like step out and totally, dissociate from our experiences. And then the last thing is encouragement, right? So if things are going really badly, we might need to encourage ourselves, right, to build up our confidence. So we can say things like, I can do this, right? Or I've managed similar or worse situations, right? It won't last forever. The one that the two phrases that I teach my students a lot, especially because I have a lot of students that they're just very perfectionistic and they hold themselves to really high standards and they end up beating themselves up, and it can be really unproductive actually. And so I teach my students two things that I say to myself, and I teach my patients, but I've found that some of my students have found it useful too, is I just say, I'm doing the best I can, right? And try to say that in the most gentle way that I can, to say like, I'm doing the best I can. Or I remember a phrase that my mentor, Zach Rosenthal, when I was in grad school, he would always say, if I would feel like kind of overwhelmed and I was like, I don't understand these statistics, or I don't understand how to, like, I can't really put my mind, like wrap my mind around this whole body of literature to be able to synthesize it. And he would say, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, right? And so those are now like my encouragement phrases, like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, right? If you were supposed to be anywhere else, you would be there. But given all of your experiences that you've had so far, this is like the place and the space where you're supposed to be. So it makes sense, and you're doing the best you can. So these are a set of skills, hopefully, that we can use to help us when we're in a difficult situation, to try to make a difficult situation slightly better. Again, it doesn't fix the problem, but it can help us to prevent from doing something to make it worse, and to make that difficult situation, especially if it's a longer lasting situation, make it a little bit more bearable. Like if you're in a house and there's no AC and it's really hot, like how can I, like, these are the types of skills we can use in those situations. Or if you're in the middle of a pandemic and you can't leave your house, right? Or there's a lot of activities that you did before that you can't do right now. So these are skills that we can use in those situations. So I want to ask if there are any questions about this, about how to apply these, how to make these as useful as possible to each of you. I see a question here from someone that was sent to me in the chat box and privately, and it says, can you share some ways that we can emotionally reroute ourselves in public or in workspaces or when we're around others? And I would say, like, of these particular skills that I shared, I think that the imagery one is one that we can use, right, in those situations where no one knows. Like if I just like for a moment in my Costco line, just like lean over my handlebar of whatever that's like the cart, and just like close my eyes and picture myself like in, I don't know, picture myself snorkeling with beautiful coral and different colored fish. And I think in my memory, they get more and more colorful and more vibrant. I don't know if that's actually what coral looks like, but in my mind, it looks amazing, right? That's one that you can use in public, right? I can use encouragement in public. I can tell myself, like, you're doing the best you can. Like, or you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I think that all of the ones that I just listed, these improved skills, hopefully are skills that we could use in these types of situations. Anyone else have any questions about how to use? It says, so here's a question from someone. It says, can you share some tips on how to let go of things your mind wants to fixate on, right? I often find my mind daydreaming on and reflecting on situations that have hurt me, or of conversations that I've never got to have, and I really want to stop thinking about it, but I don't know how to sometimes. I think that's an experience that a lot of us have, right? So unfortunately, I don't think there's a real quick fix for that. Because I think the short-term solution, like, I think it really depends on where we are. So if we find ourselves like fixating on something, and that thing, whenever we lean into that thing, it's like we're leaning into a lot of pain. We're leaning into a lot of sadness, or we're leaning into a lot of anger, or we find ourselves leaning into a lot of shame or guilt or disgust. It's difficult because obviously there's some moments where that's not effective to do. Like, I don't think like, I don't know, like in the middle of, I don't know, like in the middle of like a job interview, you know, sometimes if you have like a job interview that lasts like a half day or like a whole day, like that's not the time to like, let me like lean into that. That's a moment to distract, right? To do something to improve the moment, to go splash some cold water on your face, to go like drink some coffee, to bring like a really like yummy snack with you. Not necessarily the moment to like do the hard work of emotional processing. But if we did, let's say we said like, you know what, I do have the space, I have the margin right now, I can do emotional processing. I think a part of it, I think goes back to the compassion that we were talking about earlier, is like, how do I acknowledge this pain, right? And what is this trying to tell me, right? Like a lot of times, like we need to identify the emotion that we're feeling, and then to understand it and validate it. Like it's there for a reason, and it's trying to tell me something of what's important to me, of what I need, and trying to figure out like, what is this emotion? What is this memory? What is this image? What is this conversation that I didn't have? What is this hurt trying to tell me? And how can I then, I don't know, how can I communicate? How can I process that and be with that? And really, and not let myself quickly transition to some other emotion or to distract, right? And I think about like, if I hadn't used one thing in the moment, in that one, right, like when I was coming out of therapy, that unfortunate experience that I had, I think probably that experience would have been quickly distracted by me being really upset with my wife, because in that moment, anger came to the rescue of my sadness, and I would way rather feel angry than sad. Right? Angry feels a lot better. I feel more in control. I feel more powerful. And so in that moment, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you find something continues to come up, then maybe the hard work is like in a safe place, in a way that feels controlled, to be able to lean into that, to be able to, I don't know, to be able to make space for those emotions and for what those emotions might be telling you, so that we can, manage them, hopefully little by little learn to manage them in a way that's more compassionate and more gentle. And it's just, I guess a part of it is making sure that you are doing that in a space where you feel like you can be gentle and kind to yourself. And if you don't feel like you can, then I think that's the perfect time to have a professional with you, right? Like that's one of the value of therapy, is like, I don't know how to approach this and to be gentle and kind, and tolerant of this experience. So that's some of the work that we do as counselors. Someone else said, do you have any tips for remembering to use these techniques before spiraling into less productive ways? That's a really good question. Do you practice it in small situations so that you're ready for the bigger ones? Yes, and yes. I think the fact that you're even asking this question it means that like you're probably going to benefit from these skills. Because I think that the difficult work of doing this is practicing it when you don't need it, right? If you wait to say, I'm going to use imagery when I'm feeling super overwhelmed and distressed, and it's going to help me, or I'm going to find meaning like when I'm overwhelmed by like feeling hurt or feeling betrayed or feeling attacked, or I don't know, feeling shame of something that I did that I wish I hadn't said or done, that's going to be a really tough moment to practice it. But if we can practice, again, like the metaphor that I like to use, like if we can learn to swim in a swimming pool, then when we find ourselves in the middle of the ocean in a hurricane, we're more likely to be able to, to not feel like we're drowning in that experience and that emotion. So I would say, yeah, practicing it like intentionally, saying, today I'm going to practice using one thing in a moment, and I'm going to practice doing that for at least 3 minutes or 2 minutes every day for the next week. So that when I need to do one thing in the moment, right? When I'm walking out of a therapy office and I'm feeling really angry or upset because something really painful happened, I can actually access that skill because I've practiced it. So yeah, I would say like doing that. The other thing that can be really helpful is, where did it go? So I made these like cards, and I give these to my patients. And I'm actually making some for my students. They're just really time consuming or expensive. I've asked them to buy them. But like, I just have all of these skills, like the wise mind skill, the mindfulness skills, the emotion regulation skills, and like ABC please, which we talked about last week, right? The please skills. I have the distress tolerance skills, right? So here's like the stop skill, the accept skill that we learned about last time, self-soothe that we talked about this time, improve the moment. So I like write them down on these little cards. And then in the moment, like when my patients or when we're struggling, it's like, here it is, like, let me like see what skill I could use in this moment. That's another way, is like to create little reminders for yourself, especially when you're first learning about it. And I would say, what tips do I have if we like want to use these techniques before we spiral into less productive ways? I would say like be gentle and kind with yourself, because maybe you do spiral into an unproductive way and then you catch yourself, you're like, shoot, I'm doing that unproductive thing. I wish that I had done this. Even just reinforce that. Be like, you know what? I noticed that like, I wish that I'd used this other strategy. And I think that can be really, helpful. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions? So someone here was saying, like, I noticed myself feeling really resistant to sharing loving kindness to my enemies, right? And to people and structures that I feel like are hurting me, hurting people in our country that are, fomenting hate. Does a loving kindness meditation have to include the enemy phase? And no, it doesn't. I would say, like, meet yourself where you're at, be gentle with where you're at, observe your own limits, and do what works for you. So if it feels like, yeah, like you don't have to do that, is my answer. Okay, so I think that is everything I have for today. I hope that something in here was useful, something that you can use when you're, I don't know, going through these next few months to help improve a difficult moment, and that you can access some of these skills. And I appreciate all of you being here, and look forward to our next opportunity to talk.
And thank you, Professor Rodriguez. I really would like to also remind folks that 1 week from today, you'll have another session, skills to help facilitate change, transitioning to college life. And again, I think that folks will appreciate hearing from you 1 week from today.
Awesome.
So thank you for today and for the series.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk about opposite action next week. Like, how do we change emotions, the frequency, the intensity, the duration, so that if there is an emotion that we want to feel less frequently, less intensely, or for not as much time, we'll be talking about that next week. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.